I'm running a ICOM 736, only at about 50 watts on the meter right now, so it's doing, I think, pretty well for all I'm running.
Yeah, I'll say it's amazing what the contemporary transceivers are capable of doing on AM, Howard. It wasn't that long ago that the manufacturers didn't bother putting much into the AM mode as far as the functionality of their transceivers is concerned. And then people started waking up to the good sound and the value of the carrier in punctuating the conversation at hand, and they started putting more into it. I think they also felt pressure from the SDR manufacturers and the advent of really clean-sounding AM on both transmit and receive. And now, of course, it's fairly routine that something is what I'll call lowly is the ICOM 7300. Lowly only because of its simplicity, really. Sounds good without a lot of muss and fuss, Howard. Go ahead.
I picked up secondhand. I think it's been through 3 or 4 owners. 1996, somewhere in that vintage. So certainly not modern by modern SDR standards. It does everything that I wanted to do. It's actually a fantastic transceiver. I had really, really good luck with it. I've just been impressed by what it can do. And I'm really into the more, I don't want to say older stuff, but more simplistic. Not that I'll never jump into an SDR, but I really enjoy what this is capable of doing.
Well, no, I can't blame you. I, for many years, was adverse to the trend among 2-meter handhelds, and you mentioned your morning gathering there with Frank and the other locals. I was really adverse to all the stuff they loaded up a 2-meter handheld with. Menus and switches and scan capability, and not that it's beyond me, but it clutters up the radio. You know, I think my most modern transceiver is an FT101EE from about 1978. And I primarily use it as an exciter on a homebrew transmitter that's up on 10 meters. But I didn't for many years like the menu-driven transceivers because they didn't really let you operate the radio. And maybe you'll agree with this contention that a lot of those predetermined functions that take it away from the user also take some of the fun out of using the radio. It's kind of like a fully automated camera that doesn't let you set the f-stop or the shutter speed, or unless you switch it to manual. It just, I don't know, it seemed all superfluous to me as far as operating the radio is concerned. Go ahead.
Well, that's exactly how I feel. For example, when I was talking to Frank a few minutes ago, I was running FT8 off of this transceiver. And it's literally simply me changing frequency. There's no automatic filter that needs to be adjusted when you switch bands or anything like that that's happening with the new SDR radios. And I realize that those can be configured to your liking, but to me it's very cumbersome in the few that I have used, where this is very straightforward. It's either a button or a knob that takes care of what I want it to do.
KC3VJQ from WA3VJB. Yeah, Howard, I totally agree. I mean, I guess I usually get a little self-conscious when I say I oppose all the modern features that are on a radio, but I say that as a preamble to the fact that I accept a lot of those features in other parts of the radio room. You know, I'm running a current production transmitter that is dedicated to AM. It's specialized in AM. So there's that. And it's been in production for about 10 years. But my preferred transmitter happens to date back to just past World War II. It's an old Collins transmitter. And yet at the other end of the continuum, I'm listening to you on an SDR on the internet. It's located in Maryland, and what that has allowed me to do is to include a feature called synchronous detection, which introduces a little extra carrier on your signal, which helps me demodulate it better. I think either at the power level or perhaps at the level of sophistication of that ICOM, it doesn't mix a fully modulated audio envelope over the AM carrier. And as a result, it sounds undermodulated. What's curious is that you've got a decent passband transmitted. You're at about 4.5, which surprised me when I looked at it on the waterfall here. many of the ICOMs today, including the 7300 that I mentioned, is limited to about 3.5. And that winds up sounding a little, like that, something narrow. It doesn't have the sibilant sound and the pleasurable human elements of speech, Howard. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's very interesting as you mentioned that. My experience with AM is extremely limited. And I know Frank has been talking a lot about, I believe the radio that he is using is, correct me if I'm wrong, approximately 70 years old. So, a lot has changed in that time, but to know this is giving you a really good signal, thank you very much for that. KC3VJQ for ID.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, maybe with Frank's mentoring and encouragement, you'll be on here more often with us. It depends on what you're in the hobby for, what you're trying to enjoy. I mean, people kind of leave it open-ended and, I want to play radio, and they don't really know what that means. But speaking as someone who has been in this part of the hobby, and by that I mean AM on shortwave, this is where the storytelling takes place. This is where the technical background is explored. And this is where you actually get to know somebody to a greater extent than most of the other modes I could think of. In the early days, 2-meter simplex somewhat resembled AM on HF in the sense that you could lean into the transmission for a while and not worry about timing out the repeater. While at the same time, if you had like a Heathkit 2036, which had real FM, you could use external audio on that particular transceiver and really sound good. I mean, it was FM squelch quality, and much better than the Motorola HT220 that I preferred using. Reference my comments about complicated handhelds. The old Motorola HT220 was really a basic police radio, and I still have it. I love the thing. So, depending on where you want to explore in the hobby, Howard, that's what you'll get here in this part. Go ahead.
It's interesting you say that. I certainly have taken a slightly different path than others. When I first started into this, I have a brother-in-law who's heavily involved in the hobby also, and he was very much into the digital modes. And I said to him, I'm never going to get into the digital. I'm not interested in it. And I find myself now working FT8 or FT4 every day, just for a short period of time, because I enjoy it so much. And then I started doing parks on the air hunting and those types of things, both on FT8 and voice. And my brother-in-law at the beginning had said, no, I don't want to do any voice. I'm more into the digital, and now he's doing more sideband than he is probably his digital. So it's interesting how we all kind of morph as the time goes along.
Yeah, I think when I first got into this, Howard, which was I got my phone ticket in 73 or 74, and I had a novice transmitter that the guy who gave me my license test had up in his attic, and it dated back to 1950, the same as Frank's Valiant, same 70 plus odd years old now, and it was capable of AM and CW. And not to sound too much like an old buzzard, but in those days novices had previously been required to use crystal control, because they thought that would be the capability of their, the extent of their responsibility is to be crystal controlled. Oh my God, not a VFO. And right about when I got my novice license, they had just legalized the use of VFOs for novice class licensees. So this Collins came my way, and when I upgraded to phone, since it was an AM and CW transmitter, it became my phone transmitter. And I love telling this story, but there was a cadre of guys, mostly in the northeastern states, a little bit older than myself. I was in high school, and they were irreverent. They would thumb their nose at the league and adult authority and that sort of, and they all were on AM. So all of a sudden there was this cool factor attached to being on AM because it was like a counterculture thing. And, as I went through college and into my career and everything else, we all stayed in this kind of group where we felt radio convention, and we're, against the mainstream in a lot of cases. So I'm laughing because it sounds kind of silly and excessive, but that's been part of the reward. Hey, Howard, go ahead.
There's actually, in our local group here, we have a number of us in our 40s and 50s now, which, as I always joke on our local theater, for me to be one of the young ones sounds kind of funny, but you know what? I actually enjoy the nostalgia of some of this in many ways, and Frank, as I mentioned, has been bugging me to do AM for a while, and I really appreciate the opportunity for our first contact here. I don't know if he mentioned to you, but our local club has set up actually a couple of AM stations at our clubhouse now, which is, I guess, against the trend of what other local units are doing.
Yeah, what are the calls of that? I think I've worked. Is that in Uniontown?
Yes, that's correct. It's W3PIE.
Yeah, I actually use one of their SDRs, or actually they have a node on the Kiwi SDR platform, Howard, and it's actually quite a good node. It takes a little while to boot up. I think it goes into standby somehow, because when I key it, or click on the URL, it takes a while for it to boot up. And I don't know if that's actually on the club station campus or whether it's at somebody's house, because I've heard the station on the air at the same time that node remains active, and I don't think that would be a wise thing to do. So they might have that remoted. But yeah, I'm used to Pi radio and glad that they're running some AM gear there too. It's not as much of a surprise as you may think. I think the nostalgia kick has really spread, perhaps in part to the ARRL's building out of an AM infrastructure at W1AW. You might know already that their 7290 weeknight voice bulletin right here on this frequency is on AM, and it has been for a few years, breaking with their reluctance to use AM because of some of the other internal agenda that the league was pursuing back in the old regime. Well, they're all gone or, dead or retired or what have you, and some more progressive managers have come in there. And one of the things that they saw fit to do was to operate W1AW on 7290 AM, which is cool. They've actually also had a retired broadcast transmitter on 75 meters for the AM rally and the heavy metal rally. And they have a transmitter like this one on 80 and 40 that they did a product review for. So I think when people see a group like the ARRL embracing this part of the hobby and actually committing some infrastructure to it, it empowers or enables or somehow gives the okay to clubs like yours and a couple of other clubs I'm aware of to say, oh, okay, yeah, AM is cool, which is something I've known for how many years? Right, exactly. KC3VJQ, WA3VJB. You see my point.
Oh, absolutely. And I actually was not aware of all the things that the ARRL was doing. I kind of jotted some of this down as you were mentioning. Yeah, and just getting back to that node, I believe it is located in Jamonville. If you would Google that, it is a park area, Jamonville Glen. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that node is located near or at Jamonville, right at the top of the mountain.
Okay, yeah, I worked a guy there, WA3MJY, who's in Jamonville, and I think we went over that. Rick, you might know him. He's got an IC7610. I just one page back on the log, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, that's cool. No, it's good, though. I mean, and when I was associated with the museum station K3RTV. It's supposed to stand for Radio and Television Museum, but we call it the Silicone Seal Station because of RTV. Anyway, they had a replica broadcast station on 160 meters with a retired broadcast transmitter and a mixing console out of a radio station and an open reel machine. Of course, it was all voice programming, but the idea that a radio and television museum should be able to display to its visitors the other end of old-time radio, where those signals came from, was quite a fascinating thing to have. And to then use the span of technology to include internet-based receivers, because the museum is located in an industrial area where there's a lot of electrical noise, really demonstrated to people what's in common when you're on the radio. Technology that spanned about 80 years. Go ahead.
What was the the beginning part of that. I got the RTV at the end. I'd like to actually Google that when our conversation is finished.
Yeah, Kilowatt 3, radio, television, Victor, RTV. And I don't think they're on the air. They might be on 40 meters with a Johnson Ranger. We repurposed the outbuilding where we had this little station set up. It wasn't so little. And they moved the station into the main house where the museum is housed. But yeah, if you look K3RTV up on QRZ, you'll see some of the details of the what used to be known as the Radio History Society. Go ahead, Howard.
Hey, thank you for that. That gives me some excellent reading to do. This kind of stuff that I really enjoy, and I always look forward to looking at that type of stuff. Going back a little ways, I've actually been in this hobby about a year. I had 30 years ago, when I was a little over 30 years ago, I was graduating high school. I had gone. It was right when the tech had dropped the code requirement. I had gone to a club that I don't think exists anymore here locally, and taken a technician level class. And for whatever reason, I never ended up taking the test. And I kind of put it aside for literally about 30 years. And just a year ago, actually, I got into it again and studied and took all 3 levels this year. And really have dove into it very deep. It's a different time now. I have a little bit more time to dedicate to these kind of things, but it's been really a fun ride for a short time that I've been in it.
Well, at age 48, you're past the main distraction demographic of, getting your family in order if you're going to have kids, and, getting a relationship and getting the house bought and then getting the car paid off and all that stuff. And it frees up both time and resources for a hobby like this. And I think the marketing of amateur radio is neglecting people in your age group who have that kind of time and resources now, who may not have had it in years past, earlier in their career and what have you. So I'm constantly trying to target an older demographic than what the league traditionally tries to look toward. I mean, kids who are 18 these days, amateur radio would probably be the farthest thing from their mind. But they stream to recruit graphic, and it's not going to happen. And so instead, let's get these people like yourself who may have been exposed to radio as a teenager or younger, or have some kind of predetermined appreciation of radio. And now that they've got a little bit more attention available, go pursue it somewhere. So welcome, and I think you're a success story.
Well, thank you. I actually just became a VE just recently, and some of the test sessions that I have attended so far, basically, to go along with what you're saying, it seems to be 30s and 40s age individuals that are jumping in on their tech or general license right now. So I think that, for whatever reason, people are starting to find it. But I'm amazed at how many people are testing on a weekly basis.
Well, let me ask you this. What does your club do to get them assimilated into the hobby? Because that's the other half of the transaction. First you get them licensed, so I guess first you get them interested in it. What is amateur radio? And then when you get them licensed, you got to do something with them or else they'll lose interest. How do you mentor them into the hobby, Howard? Do you have a syllabus of some kind?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not giving more credit than what is due, because this club that we belong to here is absolutely fantastic. I cannot emphasize enough how welcoming this group has been. It's been literally a year for me, and how many people they reach out to and help out with, hey, here's a radio to borrow. You use it and get your feet wet, or come to the club and we'll help you out and get you on HF if you don't have an HF rig. Events that go on. In fact, this is coming Saturday. We're having our Christmas party, and there's picnics and things, and it's just very family-friendly group of guys. Every month there's a training class of some sort, so it's targeted towards helping people get into the hobby. And I I've seen nothing but welcoming behavior on the part of every member I've come across.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get my head around, Howard, is what direction do you give them? I mean, they've got this license in their hand, and yeah, they could borrow a radio, but are they getting the gist of why, for example, this particular QSO that we're having is available to them and enjoyable is something to consider? I mean, this is the stuff that's not written down in the handbook or the license manual. It's like, why would I want to sit and talk to this guy for a half an hour? It's like, well, it's human contact. It's social. And I don't see that highlighted anywhere to the extent that I believe would help recruit and retain people.
Well, I guess the only answer that I can give you is exactly why I'm here this morning. You know, we talk, our group talks literally on a daily basis, a couple times a day on our little revere, and it's just encouragement from one member to another. There's been a number of guys that, even the older members that I have gone, or my brother-in-law has gone over to their house and set up their transceiver for FT8 or other digital modes. So I guess it's just that exchange of information, and it's not just in the form of a cold newsletter. We're just lucky enough to have guys that are talking to each other every day in some form.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on it. You might have bumped your knob, by the way. I think you put your finger on it. A cold newsletter is not the same as actual contact. And perhaps your 2-meter group in the morning is quite the mentoring tool. Very well what I'm talking about, that it helps people actually operate on the radio and interface in a way that they might not be accustomed. Because, I mean, in this day of smartphone, video calls, and texting, you know, especially among younger people, the idea of just sitting and having a conversation on the radio seems passé. But fortunately, when you cite the people in their 30s and early 40s who are coming through your VE program, it gives me hope that they understand at least the premise that you're going to be talking on the radio, and that it sounds like something interesting, and that you're exposing them to that, the 2-meter scene. We got a club around here too that's doing that. W3VPR, massive county repeater club. They had an HF station some years ago, and I think they do a certain number of HF activities. I don't think they have any AM presence anymore, because the one guy who used to lead that moved to Arizona. And everybody else, at least at the time, and this is 15 years ago, was kind of scared of the big gear. It made big clanking noises as the relays would click. And what's that, 2,500 volts? Man, that sounds like a lot. So they were kind of scared of it compared to, running a transceiver on some other mode that it was more capable of producing. So, yeah, I see a version of that in the mornings, because I still have a fairly popular 2-meter group in the mornings that gathers on there. And I hear a lot of fairly new licensees, and they're still learning protocol where it needs to exist at all, like remembering to say your call letters every 10 minutes and that sort of thing. But yeah, it sounds like they're getting acclimated, so it looks like you're on the right path. And I think, Howard, you're reinvesting your own interest, by having become a VE. I'll tip my hat to you for that too. I've never pursued that part of it. Most of my sales and recruiting efforts are regarding this part of the hobby, because it's been underrepresented. And it wasn't until, the past dozen years or so that we started getting support from the ARRL. Not that would make or break this part of the hobby, but it sure does help when people have at least heard of it, where otherwise they might not have. And that's kind of where I'm at on it. KC3VJQ, what actual town are you in? I'll write it in the log here. WA3VJB Annapolis.
I am in Connersville, Pennsylvania. Connersville, CONNELLSVILLE. It's in northern Fayette County, approximately 15-16 miles north of Uniontown.
Okay, got that. Do you know N3TBW? Have you heard Brian on? I think he's in Connellsville too.
No, I'm not familiar with this call.
Oh yeah, I forget. This is your first AM contact. Yeah, I'm naming you some people who you're likely to encounter. in the time ahead, and hopefully you'll be back.
Yes, sir, I certainly will. I was very lucky this morning. I'm actually late going to work. I have a lunch meeting instead of my work, so I was able to jump over. But if you guys are on the weekends, I might venture back on here.
I hope so. If you've got an email on QRZ, I'll send you a link to how your rig sounds. I rolled some recording on it. I think you'll get a kick out of it. You're doing just fine on AM, Howard.
I don't have my email linked there as of yet, but feel free to send it to me through a private message.
Tell you what, since I don't use their private message system, it's kind of ponderous. Can you send me an email and I'll reply to it? It's just my call letters, WA3VJB@yahoo.com, and I'll be glad to reply that way.
Yes, sir, I certainly will. I got you at yahoo.com.
Okay, well, let me close with you now. It's coming up on 9 o'clock. I'm going to go get another cup of coffee and play a little more radio here. And, yeah, I'm glad you went in late or going into late to work, and that we've had a chance to have a chat here. I'll also thank Frank for introducing it.
Hey, thank you very much for the conversation this morning. I really enjoyed it. WA3VJB, KC3VJQ, and have a wonderful day.
Okay, Howard, and good luck in your efforts there, too, in the VE program and running that part of the club. It's a lot of work, and the volunteers don't often get enough thanks for what they wind up reinvesting in the hobby. So, again, as I said before, a tip of the hat to you for doing so, and I think it'll pay its rewards when you start hearing those licensees churned out and getting back on the air with you here. Very, very cool indeed. Well, I'm glad you spent the time. Thanks for checking in and answering my CQ. I'll look for you again there from Connellsville. KC3VJQ with Frank, K3SQP in the listening mode, WA3VJB Annapolis at the top of the hour.